Awesome. All right, everyone. Today we're going to go over buyer agency docs. And first thing that we're looking at is we're looking at CTME. And this is only a Colorado product. And for the most part, you're going to see that most Colorado agents use this. I would say about 95%. It doesn't mean that you can't use DocuSign or Dotloop or even a wet signature, because we do still see those every once in a while, but this is the most prevalent software that we do see in Colorado. And again, we're going to talk about buyer agency docs. So the very first thing after I log into CTM, I'm going to go to create new contract. So this gives us our master list. And here we are, right? We have listing docs, we have sales contracts, we have disclosures, amendments, counter proposals. Like, this is everything, including everything that actually comes from our lawyer. And so you guys can see this. This is all of our lawyer created documents as well. So termination agreements, seller advisory, like some of the things that we know that our brokerage requires, because that's how our lawyer says that they can protect us the best. So we are doing a buyer agency. And so let's say listing contract. So we are going to go into the exclusive right to buy listing contract. And now we hit this create selected contract here at the top. Perfect. Let's enlarge it a little bit. And so this is what we're looking at. Awesome. So we are on the buyer agency docs right now. And just through real estate school, we know that we have the logo of the brokerage. It has our address. It's going through and it is saying these are CEREC approved documents. And we're going through and we're doing the exclusive right to buy listing. The very first thing that we're going to do on this is we're either going to select buyer agency or transaction brokerage. Here in a minute, we're going to talk about why it's important to choose which one. Me personally, I rather be an agent. I rather be an agent because that means I have a fiduciary responsibility. It also means that I get to give my opinion and tell people why I believe that they should listen to my opinion, right? We know that as a transaction broker, we're neutral. So if they ask us a question, we don't have a fiduciary responsibility to them. We can help someone as a TB, right? Just in a single transaction, but I much rather be a buyer's agent. So we're going through, and you're all here at Keller Williams Avenues Realty. So you are part of a multiple person firm, and that's going to be the box that we check. Then as we're going through, we're going to go and we are going to put in our buyers' names. And so as you're going in here, whatever your buyer's name is, that's what you're going to put. I'm just going to go Joe Smith, and it is first name, middle name, last name. And over here on the far right, I'm going to hit add or update client database. So they're going to add this person to the database as we go through. Your brokerage, it should say Keller Williams Avenues. It will display your name as soon as you hit save. And then it's going through and it's just talking. It says property means real estate and which substantially meets the following requirements. I put any home in the Denver metro area that meets or exceeds the buyer's expectations, right? So that's kind of what this thing looks like. What I want everyone to keep in mind is that if there is a blank, we're putting in some kind of verbiage. We are not going to we're not going to really leave anything empty. So I want you to keep that in mind. If there is a blank, we're going to put something in there. It looks sloppy if we don't. So this should say any, not in, any home in the Denver metro area. And this is going to change, right? If you're doing something in Colorado Springs, you're going to change it to Colorado Springs. If it is up in Fort Collins, you're going to change it to Fort Collins, but any home in the Denver metro area that meets or exceeds the buyer's expectations. Also, keep in mind that when we're in this contract, whether it is a sales contract or a listing contract, we're always going to capitalize buyer and we're always going to capitalize seller. Always. So when you are addressing them, you're going to always do either a capital B or a capital S. Then it goes through, this is purchase. The purchase of the property means acquisition of any interest in the property. If this box is checked, we're going to do a lease. We're not going to really play with this. So guys, again, We can't put anything in there, so we'll leave that one blank, but this one I'm going to put NA. Can't put anything in that one. Again, we're going to put NA. This means that we are voiding the entire block. And so I'll show you there's nuance between none other and NA. And NA means that I don't care about really anything that is in here. None other means I don't care about this one section. I'm saying I don't care about anything in 3.6 by putting NA in there. So you're going to put NA and we're going to go out, right? It says NA means deleted. It's very nuanced and you might not get called out in a contract, but you want to be and pay particular attention to this. So NA. I like to go through and to put that if I do accidentally land on a federal holiday or a state holiday that I am unaware of, that we will continue to the next day. That's what this was saying. So like if I screwed up and there's a Colorado holiday that I wasn't aware of and banks are closed or, people aren't doing business, let's extend it one more day out. I always give myself that grace and I put that in there. Now, with that being said, pay attention to the dates and deadlines, guys. Like we want to go through, we want to ensure that we're doing our due diligence and we know that we're not landing on a Sunday, a Saturday. We're not landing on the 4th of July. We're not landing on Christmas. We're not landing on New Year's. Like we're not landing on something kind of weird. But just in case something slips through the cracks, let's put will. Here's our brokerage relationship, right? As you're going through and you're doing these different things, this is going and it's talking about the difference between transaction broker and agency. And while we all have some kind of understanding, we know that there's going to be pieces of this contract that we have to go through and talk to our clients, right? Like that we're going to go through and make sure that they understand this, right? This is a legal document. This is a document that has tax and legal consequences. So if you're here, buyer agency only, depending on who the relationship is, you're probably going to check this box, right? If this is a family member, a significant other, your best friend from high school, the bridesmaid or the maid of honor or the best man at your wedding, like this is probably someone that you have an emotional attachment to, that at all cost you are going to help them win and you don't care about anybody else in the transaction. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's real. So that's probably where I'm going to check this box. Or if you're representing yourself, right? Like buyer agency only. I cannot be a transaction broker for my wife. Like I want my wife to win because it obviously has a financial impact on me as well. So this is where we would utilize this. If it's just someone that you don't have that type of relationship with, maybe you're going to leave this box unchecked. And the reason why you would is so that you can actually step into a transaction brokerage relationship. So let's say that you have a listing, 123 Main Street. It's on the market. And then Bob Smith here, who we're dealing with, sees your listing. They're like, hey, that property looks like it would make sense for me and my needs. You go and you show them the property. Well, you have an agency agreement with both. Well, you have the right to step down into a transaction brokerage relationship because you did not check this box. If you check that box, you would have to hand someone off as a customer to complete that deal. And then it's going through and it's telling what a transaction broker is. Now, I was telling you guys that right, there's two nuances piece where it comes to buyer agency and transaction brokerage. And I like I like buyer agency opposed to transaction brokerage. And this is why. It's this section right here. And so, guys, I know that there is a lot of animosity when it comes to having a conversation with someone and telling them why it's in their best interest to sign an agency agreement. We're like, oh, I don't want to hold them down. I don't want them to feel like they're locked into doing with me. I don't want them to feel like they're a prisoner, that they're held hostage. And this is it. Firstly, if I'm working with you as an agent, I have to promote your interests with the utmost good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. Like that's part of the deal. I have to go out and seek a price and terms that are acceptable to you, right? Like it doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily land on your dollar amount, but I at least have to try and put a good faith and put a good foot forward. And this one right here. So check this out. Counseling buyers to any material benefits or risk of any transaction that is actually known by the broker. Guys, think about that. So if I'm as a transaction broker and right, I have no agency agreement signed because I didn't want them to feel like they were a hostage. And so I didn't make them sign any documents. Well, the documents in their best interest. So I go and I show them a piece of property. We know in the state of Colorado, you are a transaction broker unless you get this document signed on the agency side. And they go through and they're like, hey, Charles, what do you think about this property? Well, I can't give you any material benefits to the property. And if I knew that there was actually anything going on, like a risk to it, I couldn't tell you because I don't have a fiduciary responsibility. I don't represent you as an agent. So, guys, this line alone should be why you are pushing for an agency agreement with everyone and getting this document signed, because you actually can go through and say, like, this is the pros, this is the cons of this home. You cannot do this as a transaction broker. You cannot do this with a customer, only as an agent. And this is the thing, guys, you can put a provision at the very end of this that says, guess what? If you think that I suck at any time during this transaction, you can fire me and we will rip this contract up. Like, you can actually put that provision in. And so this is the provision that I am leaning on to actually get one of these in place before I'm showing properties and doing anything else. Then we move on to compensation. We're going to check this. I want a success fee. Like, if I help you buy 123 Main Street, I want to get paid for this. And because we were in the same brokerage, I'm going to say that I want 2.8%. This is where I start, right? I would say that this is the number that I see in most transactions for a competitive buyer commission in the Denver metro area. So I put 2.8%. And this is actually where I'm going to put none other. All right, so I'm not putting NA here. I've actually put none other in this box. This is the nuance piece. None other means just this one line has nothing else in addition to it. NA means this whole box is not applicable. Well, this is applicable because I do want 2.8%, but I don't need anything else in the second box. I actually put none other. So as you guys are going through, NAs and none others do become important. I don't want anything for the adjusted amount. So that one I'm actually going to put NA. Hourly fee, retainer fee. I'm going to put NA. I'm not going to charge any hourly fees on this. There is no retainer fee. And this amount will not. Other compensation, I am going to check this because I just said that I am worth 2.8%. My buyer said, Charles, you're absolutely worth 2.8%. What if the seller is offering 3% commission? Well, if your contract doesn't read that you can take 3%, you can't take 3%. So I'm going to put any and all incentives offered by the seller or seller's agent. So that's how I'm going to put this thing. I want any and all incentives offered by the seller or the seller's agent. So if they're saying that they're offering a $5,000 bonus, and guys, we will start to see that come back up again, right? As the market continues to get as tight as it has been getting, we could be seeing some motivated sellers offering some big bonuses. So this is one of the things I'm going to do. Any and all incentives offered by the seller or seller's agent. Brokerage fee for a lease. Nope, I don't want to participate with the lease. So I'm going big on NAs over here. Nothing in the adjusted amount and nothing in the other. That's how I'm setting up my commission. I want 2.8%. And you're going to allow me to collect any and all incentives offered by the seller or the seller's agent. And as we're going through, there is no other fees that are coming in here. Again, here's another lease. So we're going to go NA. Again, will not. And this is in the same transaction. So I'm going to go NA here. As we scroll down, it says who pays the brokerage firm success fee. And there's 3 boxes, right? We have listing brokerage firm or seller may pay, buyer is obligated. the buyer will pay. Listing brokerage firm or seller may pay, but buyer is not obligated to pay. All right, so check this out. I see a lot of you guys, as I'm getting these contracts, you guys always want to default to this one. You're like, well, I don't want my buyer to have to pay. And so we're going to leave it up to the listing agent. And this one, I tell you, you're wrong for doing that. And this is why. I'm always going to collect, it goes 731, always this one. And this is the rationale. My buyer told me I'm worth 2.8%. And on the same rationale as any and all incentives, what if you show a home where the seller says, awesome, we're offering buyer's agents $500? Well, if you checked this one, then you're only worth $500 and that's it. You can only collect $500. And think, guys, what just happened on the national MLS. Every MLS across the nation right now has taken the listing agreement or the MLS and said that the seller can offer $0 to the buyer's agent. Like, that is a new rule that took place this month that says the listing agent can offer you $0 as a co-op in the MLS. Now, they've always been able to say, like, no, we're not going to offer $1 or $500 or whatever. But now they actually can say, like, in the MLS, no, we're offering $0. Like, show the house if you want, but we're not paying you anything. Well, if you have this box checked, 7.3.3, you're getting paid $0 if your client wants to write on that house. If you have this one checked, this is what you have the ability to do. You have the right to put yourself in the contract to buy and sell, right? You're not a party to it, but this one actually gives you the right to say, seller will pay buyer co-op commission of 2.8%. This actually gives you the right to put that language in the contract to buy and sell. Now, this is the thing. The buyer could come back or the seller can come back and say, absolutely not. Or the seller could come back and say, no, we'd offer 2.5. Well, you get accepted 2.5 at that point. And you don't have to make your buyer pay. The brokerage isn't going to make your buyer pay either, right? So your buyer isn't going to have to come up with the extra point or 0.3%. They're not going to have to come up with anything else. So I encourage you guys to check 7.3.1 because it gives you the right to enter into the contract if the seller is offering less than what you said you were worth in this box right here. And guys, you will come across it. There's been companies notorious that have been like, awesome, we're going to offer $500 to the buyer's agent. Think about this, guys. If you're showing 10 properties a week, right? And you show someone 3, 4, 5 weeks, $500 isn't going to cover your gas money. And keep in mind that not only is it not going to cover your gas money, but you also have to pay the commission percentage split back to the brokerage. So you're not even getting that $500. It's even less in the grand scheme of things. So, and you have to pay taxes on it, right? Like $500, it's going to disappear very, very quickly. Always check this box and tell your clients, like, listen, I'm not going to do anything that's going to compromise the deal. This gives me the ability, after you just told me that I was worth 2.8%, to ask the seller to pay 2.8% commission. And here's the thing. I'm not going to do anything to jeopardize the deal for you. If that seller says that they were absolutely not going to pay that, I'm not going to force the issue. I won't lose that deal for you. And I'm not going to force you to pay me either. All right. You have that right. Or you might say, yes, no, you're going to pay me, but you don't have to. That's this right here. Holdover period, right? You guys can do your holdovers however you want to do them. I typically go 30 days. You know, if any house that I have showed you, you write on that house after our deal ends, within 30 days, you will owe the brokerage a commission. So that's how I write this out. I go 30 days will, you go 30 days, you go 60 days, you go 90 days, put it however you want. Then we have buyer's obligations to the buyer. Guys, this is the thing. This is that sign crossing rule. You said, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Are you currently working with a real estate agent? They say, no, we're not. Awesome. If you were working with a real estate agent, do they have a list for you of submitted properties for their holdover? And they say, no, there isn't anything. Awesome. So what you guys just did was you went through to make sure that you weren't sign crossing and you're protecting them. Like this is a big thing because if they do have an agency agreement somewhere, they would have to pay three commissions. They'd have to pay you, they'd have to pay the other buyer's agent, right? You don't want to have to do that on the sell side. There's even more from there. So you just want to go through and make sure. Go ahead, Nicole.
I just had a question real quick before we get
Yeah.
any further. Where you said the 30 days for the holdover, is that kind of average or like what's your go-to? Because I didn't realize 30, 60, 90, because if that's a long time after the contract ends. So like
Yeah,
what's good?
I typically default on 30, and you have to figure that 90 is not a whole lot of when you could be working with someone for like 6 to 12 months, 30 30 days is or 30 days isn't huge,
Okay.
right? So 60 days isn't huge. 90 days isn't huge, right? It doesn't seem like after our contract comes to an end, if you actually go back and purchase one of the properties that I showed you, you're going to pay me, right? That's all this is saying.
Oh,
So,
it's one of the properties you have shown them.
right,
Okay.
this isn't if they go get a deal with another agent. No, this is actually a property that I showed them that we tried to
Oh,
get under contract.
got it. Okay.
Cool, great question.
I have a
Which
question too.
remind, yeah, go ahead.
So how do you know that like those buyers bought the house that you showed them?
Honestly, just like anything else, you Facebook stalk them, right? No, I mean,
Oh,
like, but
okay.
in all reality, that's what it really is. Like, what you're gonna do is, you have a bad breakup with a client, and then you're just gonna watch. Like, we have agents in here that the same thing. They have holdover periods, and they break up with a client, and then the client goes and submits on a property that they were looking at. That's what kind of happens.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And guys, I just want to rewind real quick because as I was going through this thing, I skipped over this, which was not correct. The NAs on this part right here. I was so excited to talk about NAs that I misled you. The listing period. So listing period I do for 6 months is on average. So I go through here and I'm sorry because I said NA and it didn't matter, but it did matter. So your listing period, I go 6 months. So we go 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. And so I'm going to March. And I always go to the last day in March. So I don't go like 9/7 to 3/7. I'm going to go 9/7 to 3/31. I want the last day. So I apologize for that. I told you guys how this didn't matter a minute ago, and I don't know where my head was because I think I was excited about that other. So
And
you're going to
that's
put your
the
none
date.
others there. Go
Sorry,
ahead. Sorry.
that's the dates for your contract with your client.
Correct. Yep. And
Okay.
then as soon as we started talking about holdovers, I was like, hold on, Charles, you totally skipped over that piece. But yeah, so your listing period, I go 6 months. You're going to get a feel for this. And some things you're going to do differently. Like if you get like a $3 million listing, I know we're talking about the buy side, but you might go for a full year, right? You might be like, no, I'm going to need a full year to sell this property. So, and that's the longest you can do in the state of Colorado, right? 365 days. So you put this however you want to do it. And just keep in mind that once this thing ends, your holdover is going to protect you, or you might have to sign a new contract. So 30-day holdover, they will pay me if anything comes up. Buyer obligation is not and has not. And then we go through, and this is also a thing, guys. If one of you default, the other one has the ability to bail from the contract. So this is important for like this thing right here. Brokerage services. If you go through and you say that you are going to show them a property every weekend until they go find a house, and then you go on vacation or a family member gets sick or something happens, they have the ability to fire you because you are in default of contract, right? You went through here and you said, agent will show homes every weekend. And then you miss one you will be fired. So don't get cutesy in this kind of stuff, right? Like, don't be putting stuff in there that you're just like, this should win it for me. I would say brokerage services, right? Broker will show homes and negotiate contracts on behalf, come on, behalf of buyer, right? Like, don't get cute with this kind of stuff. I'm going to show you homes and I'm going to negotiate contracts. You could also put something like broker will also give names of preferred vendors to buyer, right? Like, you can put that kind of stuff. I think that stuff's safe. Don't put anything in there that could go forward and they could be like, well, you didn't do that. So now you're in default and you're fired. All right, guys, be very careful. Same thing on the listing side. If we're talking about listing contract, don't say that you're going to hold the house open every weekend until the home's sold. Think about this market. Homes are not selling in 5 minutes anymore. You could be sitting on a home for 6 months. Do you really want to be sitting on an open house every weekend for 6 months? God, no, you do not. You're going to know the neighbors at that point, right? Like, that's the only people that you're going to see is the neighbors. You're going to know their lawn mowing schedule. So, showing properties. And we go through, it says, buyer acknowledges that the broker has explained the possible methods used by listing brokers and sellers to show properties and any limitations, if any, the access. Broker's limitation on accessing properties are as follows. I would go none other. And then when we get down to this one, I would say any home that the agent can obtain lockbox information from the seller's agent. That's probably how I'm setting this thing up. Like, I can take you into any home that I can actually get lockbox information for. Because think about this, like, if you go through and if you don't have access to PPAR or IRIS and you make a phone call to the agent down there and they say, hey, no, you can't go look at that property. Okay, so that's in the contract. I couldn't get the lockbox info, so we weren't able to get into it. So I'm not in default. You can't fire me. And the other thing is if you put like you only have access to RE Colorado, really, like that's as far as you're going to go. You're not actually going to try to make a phone call or do anything to actually get access to that home. So mine is this: I have access to the MLS, and as long as I can get a lockbox code from the agent, I'm going to get you into that house. 13, disclosure of a buyer's identity. All it does, and this is the thing, while at the end of the day, none of you on the list side want to accept a letter, a love letter from the buyer. On the buy side, I'm not opposed to sending one. I don't think that you are in fair housing violation for accepting, or no, not accepting, for sending a love letter. And what a love letter is this: it's like, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we love your house. We could totally see raising our family in this house. Here's a picture of our family. Also, I noticed a bunch of firefighter decor. My husband is also a firefighter, da da da, whatever, right? Like, that's a love letter. And it is against the law, right? Because you saw familial status. And, right, like if I sent a photo of a Hispanic couple to a white family, right? And then that family, that seller didn't accept it. Well, there could be a fair housing violation there. I have no problem sending those letters. You never want to accept one. You guys want to delete them, throw them away, don't do anything. I can tell you, I have won 2 deals on the buy side where we've written the love letters And they were like, absolutely, we want a nice family to be living in this house to raise their children, da da da, whatever. Firstly, that's against the law. Like the seller side just broke the law. We didn't break the law by sending it. So I want the ability to disclose my buyer's identity, like, oh yeah, they're a firefighter and they just want to raise their family in this neighborhood, da, 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 whatever. That's not against the law. If we get rejected, the seller potentially broke the law, but we did not. So I want this. And you're not always going to send these love letters, but every once in a while you might. We're going through, we're just talking about right non-discrimination, which would go back to that love letter. This thing, right? Like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, by signing this document, there are tax and legal consequences, and you should go talk to a CPA, a tax professional, your lawyer, before you sign this. Most people aren't going to do it, but this is what it's going to. Mediation. We know that we go to 30 days of non-binding mediation if there is an issue arise, right? Like something happens to where they want to have a contract, we want to have the contract, the other party's not letting them out. We would go to mediation that's non-binding. Then what happens is after that, we go to talk to the lawyers, right? And so if there's attorney fees, in the event of any arbitration or litigation related to the buyer's listing contract, the arbiter or the court will award the reasonable costs and expenses, including attorney fees and legal fees. Awesome. So if you lose in court, you're also going to pay the legal fees and the attorney fees for the winning party. That goes both sides. If you lose your client will have to pay all your fees, and vice versa. If you lose, you're going to have to pay your client's legal fees and attorney fees. And this is the thing, guys, we all know that the CREC, all these rules and forms were put into place to protect the public from us. For the most part, we're not winning most of this stuff. Like we're probably going to lose this thing, so be careful of it. All right, so then we get to additional provisions. We have this clause catalog here on the top right, which is pretty neat, right? So here's our clause catalog. And you can see that they're kind of in order. So these are for amendments. This is for the contract to buy and sell. These are for emails. Like this is, will go into the email. Exclusive right to buy. This is inspection. And this is for listing. Cool. So we have these things. You can also see when they were written, which isn't important, but you can also see that this is from our lawyer, right? So our lawyer, we used to have some other ones in here and they finally removed them, but this is what our lawyer has asserted. So this is from our attorney. Guys, we have to make sure that if we're putting this stuff in here, that we understand what it means. All right. And if we put something in here that we don't truly have a full grasp around, we have the ability to get sued at that point, right? Because we weren't able to explain it. We didn't know what the ramifications were. We're talking about the exclusive right to buy. Well, one of the things that I do is this one, transaction coordinator. I go through and I say buyer understands that, and I used Andy. Buyer understands that Andy Gade is an unlicensed assistant and will be helping broker throughout this transaction. Buyer authorizes coordinator to receive buyer's personal information. The broker is solely responsible for paying the coordinator. Like this is one of the things, if you guys are using a transaction broker or not as transaction coordinator, this is one of the clauses, one of the provisions that you are going to want to put in here and put your transaction coordinator's name in there. You have all kinds of other things, right? And a lot of them aren't truly applicable, right? There could be a rebate to the buyer. There could be like a termination clause. The buyer's listing contract between the buyer and the broker's firm is terminated effective immediately, right? We're not going to put that in there. Broker's firm and broker hereby waive any and all rights to commissions or fees from buyer. Buyer releases broker and team, right? So like this isn't one that we're going to throw in here, but this is one where we would end a contract. We also have the team clause, right? Because now I'm seeing like we got Lyndon and Ruth on this call. So broker is a member of, I'm going to put mine on here. Broker is a member of Absolute Home Group. Therefore, me, Charles Coleman, is designated as a broker under this buyer listing contract. Then I'm going to put my wife's name. So it says, or I'm sorry, Absolute Home Group consists of the following following licensed agents. So I'm going to put, so this is how you're going to wrap this thing up. So if you're running a husband and wife team, you have multiple people on um your team, this is where you're going to put this information in. You want to let them know that the other person might not be as a co-lister or a co-buyer's agent on the contract, but they might be helping you in some kind of capacity. So you want to absolutely put them on this contract. So for example, what I do, so I go through and let's say for a listing, I don't put Aaron on the contract. I do put this provision in there so they understand that Aaron's here. Aaron might be doing some counseling. Aaron might actually have to go show a house. Aaron might have to do something. And I want to put Aaron in the MLS so Aaron gets credit for having a sale of a home, right? But I don't want her to actually have to go to the closing table, have to sign any documents for us both to sign and all these. So I go through and I say, Aaron's actually a member of the team. She might help you with something, but we're not going to actually put her as the co-buyer's agent, but she is a part of it. So this is where I would put this. You also, right, we talked about that one fee or that one piece up here where we're saying the obligations, right? So right there, nope, right here, who pays? So we went here, broker is authorized and instructed and requested payment of brokerage firm success fee with listing brokerage firm. Buyer is obligated to pay any portion of the brokerage firm success fee, which is not paid by listing brokerage firm. Talk about that here in a second. Go ahead, Nicole.
Just about the clauses, those ones that you were adding in there, is that all on the CTME contracts like in there, or did you add those in there?
No, all of you should have access as long as you set up CTM right.
Okay.
So, and what I mean by that is when you go through and you say that you're a part of Keller Williams Avenues Realty, it's going to pull all of our lawyers' documents in there, and you'll have access to all of them.
Okay, not your specific lawyer, like Keller Williams lawyer.
It's Keller Williams lawyer,
Okay,
absolutely.
got it, got it. Okay, thank you.
But that's a good point as well, right? So you guys need to be thinking about this, right? This is one of the big reasons why we don't share our lawyer with our clients, right? And so your clients are like, hey, does anyone have a lawyer? Firstly, you don't give them the brokerage's lawyer, and you don't give them your lawyer, because if they go and they talk to your lawyer and they have a conversation and then they decide that they want to sue you, neither one of you can use your lawyer anymore, because that'd be a conflict of interest for the lawyer to represent you. Same thing with the brokers. That's why we don't give our brokerage lawyer to our clients, is because if you guys get sued, we need to be able to protect you. And so that's why we don't let our broker or our lawyer go talk to our clients. But that was a great question. Yeah, no, my lawyer stuff is not in here. This is only Damian Cox, the brokerage lawyer's info.
Thank you.
So you are welcome. So as we're talking about that one, right, we can say we have the ability to practice limited law, right? This is fill in the blank contract. We have the ability to write our own provisions in here. Now, this is the thing. Minus some of these different pieces like this, like my transaction coordinator, this is just, it's CYA, but it's also to be information for the buyer. We cannot, other than like certain things like this and maybe this one, we can't put the same clauses in over and over and over and over again. That's also against the rules. Like we can't do that. But there are going to be different times where we have to do some different things, and we have the ability to actually write our own provisions. So buyer and agent understand that at any time, if the buyer is unhappy with the services that the agent is providing for the buyer can terminate the contract. If buyer is under contract with or contract on a home, then this contract cannot be terminated. So you can put a provision in like that, right? So we just talked about where we're going through and we're saying that they're obligated to pay, and maybe your client feels uncomfortable with that verbiage because they're like, oh yeah, but what if, and I don't feel comfortable signing this. Well, then we put a provision in there. And right here it is. This is the thing. Like if you're unhappy with this thing at any time, you can fire me. Like you're not gonna be paid. You could also put that the buyer will not have to come out of pocket for any expenses in regards to commission, right? Like you can put that kind of stuff in here. Just make sure it's understandable, right? That's the biggest thing. You think about any time that you write one of these provisions, you're not lawyers, and it has to be understandable. So if you write something and it isn't understandable to the general public, like if a fifth grader wouldn't be able to understand what you wrote, you did not do your job, right? Like it has to be 100% understandable for anyone just reading the thing and going through. Any questions about these clauses? And there's a lot of them, right? Like, and you can see there's different ones. Like if we were talking about a contract to buy and sell, we might actually put something in there around these appraisal gaps. And these are probably like your three hardest ones to understand because they all mean something different. They did break it down and they actually said kind of what they mean, right? The first one says that the buyer is actually going to bring a little bit of cash to the table, but the seller is actually going to drop the price. The other one says that the price will be reduced, and so it's favoring the buyer. And this one says it's actually favoring the seller, and the buyer will bring cash. Right. So that's what these three are kind of saying, but you have to understand these. So you can't just throw blanket ones in here because the worst thing that happens is when you put verbiage in a contract and the other party thinks it means something else than what it really means. Then we have an issue. So while that isn't this one, because we're talking about exclusive right to buy, these are the three probably hardest ones to understand. And you're probably going to use these ones maybe the most. And there's more parties involved with using it. Cool. All right, let's go down. Let's check this out. So we have attachments. So this is what's actually being attached to the contract, the exclusive right to buy. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on the docs list. And so here are the different things. So I'm going to go through and brokerage disclosure to buyer, docs list, oh, I don't see it. I don't see it in here. Cool. So we know the other one. So let's just hit go. The other one would be buyer advisory. So those are the two that we're going to go through and we're going to look at. So check this out. I'm going to show this to you. If you guys have any questions, here is your list. I'm going to pull it up a back way so you can see it. If you're going through and you already have the client made, you're going to go through the front way of doing this. But if you have any questions on like, oh my goodness, like what's mandatory with my contracts? Like I said, I'm going to go the back way to show you guys this, and you don't really have a whole lot of visibility into this, but on your side of things, you already have the contract going, the opportunity going, so it'll be there. So you can see that we have to have the brokerage disclosure to buyer on the buy side. We have to have the exclusive right to buy on the buy side, and we have to have the buyer advisory. So those are the very first things, right? We got the brokerage disclosure to buyer, and we have the buyer advisory, and we're working on the exclusive right. So those are the three attachments that need to be, or the two attachments that need to be with this piece, because you need to have all three of those to have your opportunity to get paid, right? If we're looking through a little bit further, here's the under contract piece. Like all these are the required ones. And then right, all the R's are required. And if you have any of these other things, then they are required, right? All these mean, these other ones is like, if you have it, it's required. And it doesn't mean like if you have access to it. It means like if you filled one out or if you received one, you have to turn it in, like a certificate of occupancy. You don't have one of those on a regular contract. But if you're doing a new build, there's going to be a certificate of occupancy, right? And same thing on the sell side. Like, and so you actually need to have both of these, the consult and the under contract. This is what's going to get you paid by Elizabeth. So if all these pieces aren't done, I know it's not part of the class, but just in case this is a part of the class, this one isn't. If you don't have all this information done, Elizabeth isn't going to tell the title company how much money to cut you and how much money to cut the brokerage. All they're going to say is send this check to me, and then what we'll do is we'll pay you, the agent, at a later point. So you need to have all of these done. And then what Elizabeth does is say, awesome, the split to the brokerage is X amount of dollars, and the split to the agent is X amount of dollars. Please cut 2 checks. Because the alternative is that you have to wait till you get all this paperwork done. But those are the 2 attachments. So put those in there. Brokerage disclosure to buyer, buyer advisory. So then we're going through and it's just saying like, hey, this is how we're going to get information from. And I like to put CTME because it's not really in there, right? Like you see this electronic address of recipients by fax. That's what fast mail means. If anyone's curious, that's fax. Email, and this isn't really email. This is through CTM. So I just put CTME in there. It's going through and it's saying that all this is good. Megan's Law, right? We talked about that. So check this out. Then I hit save. And if we were to scroll back up to the top, right, we saw my name saved now. There's my client. What I want you guys to get in the habit of is at the very bottom here, we only have one buyer. That's Joe Smith. You can see Joe Smith has popped up. Put Joe Smith email in there. So we won't put Joe Smith email. So I'm going to put my email in there for fun right now. And I'm just going to hit save again. Cool. So now it's all saved. All that stuff is good. Now, a couple things that we're going to do. If I were you guys, get in the habit of doing this. Hit this PDF print button. And you open up this PDF print, and I enlarge it. And this is how you guys can self-check yourself. This is how I self-check it. Like when you guys send me a contract to look at, this is what I do. I do the PDF print version. And all I do is I go through and I just make sure that everything's checked and there's nothing really missing. So I'm just going through, I'm checking these things, like there's verbiage. I see I got my none others in there, the wills, and I'm just looking through and I'm seeing like, is there something missing? Like there's something missing here, but it's not necessary. It's only buyer agency only. I'm going through, I'm double checking. There's cool, I'm getting paid, which is important. I'm not a nonprofit, hourly wage, all that stuff. Like this is how you can self-check yourself. Just go through and hit this button and run through it and just make sure that everything that needs a checkbox or something written in it has a checkbox or something written in it. Then what we're going to do is feel free to exit out of this. And we're back to the beginning. I'm going to create new contracts. We have the exclusive right to buy. I'm going to create a new contract. And we have the buyer advisory. So we're going to go down to the buyer advisory and we're going to use Damien's buyer advisory. So we're going to go through buyer advisory. This is residential. Create contract. And you guys can see this is how you view it. If you hover over these buttons, this is notes, right? So if you want to put a note in there, which I don't know why you would, but you can put a note. And this is actually how you fill stuff out. If you need to fill something out on a smart contract, you can see like the way we got into this thing was way different. But here it is. It has all the information already filled out. You actually don't have to do anything. And the buyer advisory, all it is like bad stuff that happened in a real estate contract. not only can bad stuff happen, but if something bad does happen, it could cost you some money. And so all this is a giant CYA for you. That's all it is, but it's part of our contract. So now I go back, and the other thing that we needed to have a brokerage disclosure. So I'm going through brokerage disclosure to buyer, create. And again, here's the brokerage disclosure. And we're going to go over here and we're going to click this. And you have the ability to fill out some stuff. So now I'm going to go multiple person firm. The buyer is reference is not entered into a buyer agency agreement. We require this document for this reason. It's another CYA, because a lot of you guys are having some conversations with people before you get documents in place. So go through and get this thing done. So you're going to click multiple person firm. Don't worry about these two. You're not going to worry about any of this, right? Because that we're not working as a customer. We're not going to show them our property. This isn't a transaction broker relationship. Put in the date. Via, I put CTME here. And then all you're going to do is hit save. And now that's saved. Cool. Now this is why this was all important. Let's go all the way back. Let's go all the way back. So now we're going to email contracts. You hit this email contracts button, and you can see that your buyer, Joe Smith's information is right here. So I can actually say, I want this email to go to Joe Smith. I want you to send all three of these, right? I want you to send the exclusive right for him to sign. I want you to send the brokerage disclosure for him to sign. I want you to send the buyer advisory for him to sign. I always do stuff like this. Joe, please find the contracts that we discussed attached to this email. Please review these documents. And if you have any other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Right, so I'm doing some kind of verbiage like that to send it to them, right? There's the button, and this is the email button. So this is going to email them all these different things. And let's say that you didn't have this person, like you want to send it to Margaret, you want to send it to me, you wanted to send it to someone, you can just put the email here. Like you can actually type it in, and like Charles sub contracts, you know, this is e-contracts 4, and it will actually put the address in and it'll send it that way. But this is how you would actually get to one of us to review your contract for you. But if we're not, go back to Joe, delete this. Since at the very bottom, I actually put their information in, I just click his info right there. This is the same place you're going to go when you're actually sending contracts to the agents as well. Like all their information, you see the seller, the listing agent, the lenders, like everyone's info will kind of live here, and you can fire off these contracts. But all those, they go through, then you're going to go in, you're going to upload them to Command, you're going to be able to fill them out. Let's go back to main. And again, so here's my main screen. This is where we started from. There's Joe. This is what we just worked on for Joe. The exclusive right. This is what we built. All right, guys, that was 56 minutes of just the exclusive right to buy. Comments, questions, concerns? You guys are an easy group. Oh, Liz.
Yes, I just think it was really helpful how you went through everything, and I'm glad you're recording this because I will definitely be coming back to this because I took some notes, but it's nice that I have this to refer back to and to practice off of. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. You're welcome. And this is the thing, guys, we don't expect any of you to be experts in this, right? Like this is something, it is going to take many, many, many contracts to write to get a feel for it. just the biggest thing that I want you guys to keep in mind as you're going through is everything needs to have something. Like it either do you need a checkbox or do you need to have some kind of verbiage? And again, if they have these boxes for you to fill in the blank, fill in the blank. And if you're blocking out just a piece like this one, we go none other. This is just a piece. I want this provision in here, but this is just a piece. Now, if I want to get rid of the whole thing, like a lease, because dear Lord, run, I don't want anything to do with a lease. It's NA, like it is not applicable to this transaction. I am not doing a lease, so bye bye. So none other and NA. And again, those are nuancy things, which I don't think your hands will be held to the fire if like you put an NA where none other belongs. But I think it's just good practice. And this is the things like when I'm having conversations with people, including experienced agents, and we're looking at contracts. And this is the first thing that experienced agents tell me. Well, I had to help the agent on the other side of things write their contract. And then that just sets the whole tone. They're either like, I am going to take this agent to school now, or this is going to be a super painful transaction and I know what I'm getting myself into. Right. So if we can just start here and make sure these things are clean, and obviously you have Margaret that's going to look over these. If you need something to me, I'm going to look over them. Mine look a little bit different. Like when we talk about agency agreements, we're going to look at the exact same things for the most part. The contract to buy and sell, though, that's more nuance. When I look at it, I'm just looking at it to make sure you're not getting sued. Margaret's more looking at it more of like a strategic, like these are the different things you should be doing, different levers to pull. And I'm just like, CYA, I don't want you guys to go through a lawsuit and I don't want you to get hurt. So that's how we're protecting you. Lyndon, I saw you take yourself on back on camera. Did you have anything for us?
No, I was thinking about the same thing Liz was saying. This was extremely helpful, and there's no question about it. I'm going to go through the your recording because there was a lot of information. But yeah, this is, I don't want to call it the Bible, but it's almost like the Bible of you better have this close by and you better have this video close by for those of us who haven't had the experience to write a lot of contracts yet.
Yeah, and get a feel for it, right? I think that's one of the things is like I get a lot of questions that come back my way, and I'm sure Margaret gets even more. It's like, well, now how do I email this? Like those are some of like the basic questions that we get. And so what I would do is like this isn't like a pay per use kind of thing. And if you guys already have this thing and you can get a free one, so this is also like maybe go get a dummy email, and if you don't want to be paying for the software, like you're not working with a client right now, go get the dummy email and set up an account because you get 30 days for free. And just create some and send them to yourself so you can actually see how they come in and you can get a feel for writing it. And again, like I said, you're not going to memorize it, but at least you'll get a feel for it. And then you can see, okay, cool. So this is how it looks when I get it. This is what the email looks like when it comes through. This is what my clients can sign. Because also like one of the nuancy pieces, so check this out. So this print preview, this is actually how it shows up to your client in print preview. So I showed you guys PDF print for yourself to look at to make sure you didn't miss anything. But this is how the print preview looks. And the biggest piece on this thing that looks different is this. There's actually a signature box for them to sign and for you to sign. And so they actually have the ability to go through here and go select signature, pick their font, and then they hit save. And then they actually have to hit save again because this thing says like, are you sure you want to do this? And then you hit accept. And now it's signed. And what we should have received, if you have it turned on, is I got an email saying that this contract has been inked. Like, hey, Charles signed this contract at this time. So you guys will actually get information that people are signing contracts, which is pretty neat. What's up, Nicole?
I was gonna ask, when you're doing these contracts, is it better, do you more email them or do you do them together in person?
Great question. I think that's also a nuance piece as well. And I can tell you that I've had a client, she was in her 80s, and I got the opportunity to read the entire contract line by line to her over the phone. I think twice. Because she also allowed me to go over stuff that I don't think that I was maybe very clear, and she wasn't on the same page with me. So then she re-asked me when I got to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So, so you might just pick and choose. I've also had clients where I've gone and be like, hey, let's go, go to Starbucks and go, let's talk about this, because I like to think of this as a listing appointment as well. And like a listing presentation to where I'm not highlighting and talking about everything. That's why I'm asking them to reread it on their own. Because if you were to reread this, while we just did this in only an hour, if I were to read every line to you, it probably would have taken us an hour and a half. And if you weren't real estate agents, and I know that you guys probably had some questions that you were like, I'm not comfortable asking Charles that question, at least in a public setting, that they're going to ask those questions as you're going through. So as we're doing this, it's just you're going to know your client. So there's going to be some clients that, yes, probably doing the meeting in person makes a whole lot of sense. And there's also going to be ones where it's just kind of fire it and highlight over the high level stuff. Like you also might get to the point where you're calling out in the email to where you're almost doing like a cover letter. Like, here's the highlights of the contract. And again, please reread over. And again, if there's any questions that you have, ask me. Because there's two different personalities, right? We have a C and a D. Right. And the C is going to read everything and they want to know and understand how it all works and all these things. And then there's going to be the D personality that, like myself, where I just sign. I'm a signer. I don't read it. Like, I'm like, oh, this looks boilerplate. I'm signing it.
Same.
And yeah, right. Like, and my wife is a C. She'll read it. And so she reads stuff. And what I do is I just wait. And after she reads and starts signing, I sign it because I know it's safe to sign at that point. She's not going to yell at me for just signing blindly. I'm like, what do you mean you read it? I thought there was anything that popped out you would have told me about. So you're just, it's nuance. You're going to pick and choose how you do it. But for the most part, no one's reading these things. And I know we're on a recorded line and I probably shouldn't say that, but your clients aren't reading these. They're signing them blindly as well. I just did a listing where it was a family friend and she was an older lady. She was in her 80s, not in her 80s, she's probably closer to her 70s, but this was her first time selling a house. And even though I walked her through the high level stuff, what she also did was she would send it to her kids and her kids would reread it, even though I had the relationship with the kids. And she would send it to the kids and the kids would reread it to make sure that their mom was protected. So you'll figure it out. Like I just send them though. And this is where I would say like the other one, maybe it's a listing appointment that you have and you don't have a relationship with the seller. You actually might want to have them sign at the table. Like you might want to bring this with them and have them sign it right then and there. So you lock it in and no one else can snake you. Because that could happen. That absolutely could happen as well. Like you're like, awesome, I'll send you the paperwork when I get back to the office. And then they don't sign it and you call them and they didn't answer. And then the next day you call them and like, oh, you know what? My neighbor told me about their buddy who's a real estate agent and they came over this morning and we signed the documents. So you're going to pick and choose what makes the most sense.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Anything else, guys? Awesome. Well, hey, we will get this recording out to you. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We will start doing monthly contracts stuff again. Like we realized that we kind of got away from that and we need to start doing it. So I don't know what we'll do next. It'll probably be the exclusive right to sell, which is a little bit more nuancy. And then we'll get into the contract to buy and sell, which will be a much longer class. And so it'll either be me or Margaret teaching that one. I don't know who, but one of us will. So awesome, guys. Have a great rest of your Thursday. And we'll see you guys a little bit later.
Thank
Thanks
you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Bye.